1. The topic is that we should create a minimum quota. We should impose a minimum quota for domestically created media. The panel this afternoon is composed of Tasneem, TJ, Hafiz, Ben, and myself. I'd just like to request you to please turn off your phones or put them on silent. If you're going to leave the room, if at all, please do so in between speeches. So I now invite first affirmative speaker.
Madam Speaker, we believe that the governments of a nation do have a full extent of right to protect their infant industry, to protect their domestic industry in competition of foreign materials. Now, in this debate today, we would like to talk about these domestic movies and dramas, these domestic media products. And we would like to set this minimum quota as setting a minimum period of screening, allowing how many months or how many days would these domestic products will be allowed other than to these foreign products, and giving them a minimum quota of periods of screening, Madam Speaker. Now we say that we believe that this policy has the effect of protecting this infant industry, has the effect of protecting their domestic materials, and it will bring further long-term benefits. Now, moving on to our major case, Madam Speaker, we say that these governments do not, we believe that these infant industries and this domestic industry, when competing with this domestic, with these huge industries that are already developed a lot, such as US Hollywoods or any other movie industries, these infant and domestic industry certainly have disadvantages. And we believe that the government does have a role in engaging such actions. Now, in first argument, I would like to talk about how the government actually has a role in protecting the infant industry and the domestic industry. In second argument, I would like to talk about how then quota system is the best solution in helping these infant and domestic industries. Now, our second speaker will talk about the benefit of long terms that this policy will bring. Now, moving on to our first argument, Madam Speaker, why does the government have a role, and why does the government should exercise their rights in terms of infant industry? We say that the government has a role in providing an economic freedom to every individual in our society. We say that the government should establish a fair competition in terms of these corporations, Madam Speaker. We say what we do not want to see in this debate today is governments washing out these weak industries just because they do not have a first mover advantage. Just because they're weaker than stronger and foreign industries, we do not want them to be washed out of this industry, Madam Speaker, because they're not being provided chance at the very beginning. If you do not have any system to protect these weaker medias or weaker materials, we believe that the government themselves are not providing any chance them to establish a prosperity at all, Madam Speaker. For example, in any kind of liberal democracy countries, Madam Speaker, we also do not see governments letting their domestic infant industry to do whatever they want, to let them be and fall out and die in our industry. Because what they think is that these infant industry do deserve to be ensured at least a chance to prosper in our society, Madam Speaker. However, we say when these governments do not exercise such actions, we believe that these weaker medias or weaker domestic materials and infant industries do not have this chance to exercise their freedom of economy. They do not have this freedom to establish their exercise their freedom of economic at all, Madam Speaker. We told you when the government actually recognizes the fact that these people are these industries or these materials are inferior, subjectively inferior to these foreign products, we believe that the government should exercise such and ensure and guarantee certain chances and the ground to actually establish their materials, their products, and to go further step, Madam Speaker. We say, for example, you do not irresponsibly say, these grocery stores, you can survive, you can make it up to yourself and let it be because the whole world is very competition. When actually these grocery stores are working next to these huge Walmarts or any other huge corporations, we do not irresponsibly say you should work it up to your own. But at the very beginning, we give them a chance to actually establish their freedom of economy, give them a chance to at least prosper, Madam Speaker. Now, these are the reasons why we believe that the government should actually give them a freedom of economy, at least a chance to prosper at the very beginning for these infant industries, because they do not have a first mover advantage at the beginning, Madam Speaker. What we do not want to see in this debate is these infant industries just falling out just because they do not have the full capacity to compete with these foreign materials. Now, the second part of this argument is why the government has the justification in protecting these domestic products. Because, Madam Speaker, we believe that the government's the utmost goal is we believe that the government's utmost goal is to have the interest for their citizens. Their primary interest is up to their domestic products, is up to their domestic competitions, to their domestic people, Madam Speaker, because their role is to adjust these benefits and their interests of their own citizens and of their own corporations, Madam Speaker. For example, when foreign companies come in or foreign products come in, we tax them even more than the domestic products, Madam Speaker. We have more restriction to foreign companies or foreign products because we do believe that the domestic products come before any other foreign materials or any other foreign products, Madam Speaker. We believe that this right for this government is actually giving a privilege to these domestic materials. We do not believe that this privilege itself is bad because they're exercising the right to their domestic people and to their domestic material. We believe this is what the government should do, and we do not necessarily believe that this privilege given to this domestic industry is certainly bad. Now, moving on to the later part of our argument, how can then quota system best help these industries? Now, Madam Speaker, we do not believe that any other systems can better motivate and incentivize other industries to screen their movies. For example, if you look at movie industries in CGVs or any other theaters in Korea, we do not believe if these theaters actually believe that other foreign movies are better than domestic movies, because their utmost goal is actually to profit from those movies. They do not have any incentives to show longer and screen longer of their domestic products. We do not believe that the very role of these entrepreneurs and the role of the government differs. This is when the government actually has the reason why they should implement this quota system. Because without this quota system, we cannot see that these theaters or any other movie industries do actually have this incentive to screen these domestic movies longer and ensure this time to these domestic movies if they actually recognize the fact that these foreign movies will better them in profiting, Madam Speaker. Therefore, we believe that the government actually has a role into implementing this quota system, because once you actually implement this quota system, even though you do not want to, these CGVs and other movie theaters now have to, even though they do not want to, they have to implement such quota system, now ensuring and guaranteeing certain screening periods for domestic products. This will only, Madam Speaker, enhance these citizens and these movies to the exposure of the general public, Madam Speaker. And we do not see why this exposure itself will bring more profits in and bring more benefits into these domestic products, Madam Speaker. We told you, so Madam Speaker, in this debate today, how the government actually has a role in protecting the infant industry in terms of laying out a fair playing, in terms of laying out and guaranteeing the exercise and guaranteeing the freedom of exercising their economy. Secondly, we also told you how it comes to an importance when you actually protect your domestic industry, because their utmost primary goal is to interest and benefit their own citizens and their own products. And we told you that this necessarily isn't something bad when you're trying to protect and prosper your own own products. Lastly, we also told you how quota system itself will only incentivize these theaters and these industries in our own country to screen more longer in our country. For these reasons, I'm very proud to propose.
Madam Speaker, what we see in today's debate is that we have a proposition whose model firstly isn't going to work to solve the problem they have highlighted, but secondly, even if it did work, it would be for completely the wrong reasons. I'm going to tell you why in my rebuttal section before moving on to my two substantive arguments, in which I'll be telling you firstly why the market forces of supply and demand are the best method for distributing resources, because we are secondly moving on to my argument about the role of government, which would clash with this idea from the proposition. Now, firstly, ladies and gentlemen, we see that within their model, all that they have told us is that we would reserve a certain amount of airtime for certain local media. We say that, ladies and gentlemen, that airtime alone is actually completely meaningless. What is also important is the time at which these channels are actually broadcasted. For example, if these are broadcasted during primetime TV, we think that that would receive a higher audience than, say, simply a TV channel at, say, 3 or 4 a.m. So we think that those are details within their model that they need to clear up if they are going to solve the problem. Second of all, ladies and gentlemen, we think that given the amount of local media there is, you ultimately still have to pick and choose. Within that limited time frame, we don't think that you can basically cater to everyone. So if they say they want to save everyone, they actually have to save everyone. We say that ultimately someone will have to be sacrificed, but they don't seem to be willing to accept that reality. So now let's move on to our rebuttal about their arguments about how we shouldn't allow weak industries to be washed out. And secondly, I'll be telling you about this idea about protecting the interests of citizens. Now, firstly, ladies and gentlemen, on this idea of washing out weak industries, their first premise within this case is that because these industries are so small, they are unable to compete with large overseas foreign multinational companies. We say that this is not true. We think that competition isn't only based on size, it's also based on things such as quality, your uniqueness, and your attractiveness to the audience, and the way that you can sell it to the audience, ladies and gentlemen. So we don't think that simply because they're lacking in bulk, it means that they're necessarily less attractive. We take the example of how people still watch their local news stations because they find them appealing, even though there are much bigger companies like BBC or CNN that also broadcast in their countries, and perhaps in the same language. Because we see that if you have that appeal, you won't need to protect these industries because they'll be able to survive on their own. Secondly, this idea of chances at the beginning. We firstly point out that this motion isn't only about those infant industries that we're talking about. We're also talking about established industries that are dying out because people no longer want to watch them. Second of all, within this point, ladies and gentlemen, we also say that you can't protect all of the infant industries because there are still large and small companies within your local media, and we say that the large companies will ultimately eat up the small companies if their analysis holds true. Now, let's move on to this idea about how we need to protect the interests of citizens. We say that they have actually muddled up in today's debate that since we agree with them that the government's role is to protect the interests of local citizens. We say that it is ultimately the citizens who are most important and the people that the government is accountable to. But here's the difference, ladies and gentlemen. We will only protect an industry if the local people actually want them. If they want those local products, then the government would have more justification to go out and protect them. The reason that no one watches these sort of TV channels is because, ladies and gentlemen, the local people don't want to watch them. And if you say that the role of the government is to cater to the interests of the people, we don't see why this is justification for forcing people to watch TV channels that they don't want to watch. So now, moving on to my substantive argument, I'll firstly tell you about why supply and demand in the media industry is the best way of distributing resources. I'll tell you a few things here. Firstly, I tell you that you can't force demand. If demand has to come naturally, it comes from the perception of people towards the media that they are watching and whether they want it or not. When there's demand for viewers, there's inevitably those sort of channels will make it onto primetime TV. Those sort of channels would get coverage. Because when there is demand from the viewers, there is demand from the broadcasting companies to buy those channels so that the people, buy those programs so that people will watch those programs. And therefore, because more people watch the programs, they increase the sort of advertising income that those broadcasting companies will get, which is ultimately the main source of their income, ladies and gentlemen. We say that when there is no demand, you basically can't force it. When someone in Hong Kong prefers to watch a Korean drama over some trashy Hong Kong talk show, then by all means let them watch that Korean drama, because even if you put that talk show on TV, no one is going to watch it, ladies and gentlemen, because people don't want to. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, we think that it's time for the proposition to accept that in the real world, in the real economic world, we go by a system of survival of the fittest. We tell you that dying industries should need to die. Another role that such industries play within society is that they have to, quote, lead to a positive impact and contribution within our society. And that's something that the media is usually able to do. But when society has determined that it's unable to continue that role, if we are really to cater to the interests of the people, ladies and gentlemen, we should no longer waste our resources on allowing these sorts of local industries to persist any longer. The same way that when some countries see that their manufacturing industries are dying, they would actually need to seek other ways to revitalize their industries, rather than try to keep up a lagging manufacturing industries that is no longer as competitive as their foreign counterparts, ladies and gentlemen. We also say that this will affect the local economy as a whole. When you have those sorts of inefficiencies kicking into play, because we say that that company will no longer be motivated to compete at as high a level as before, because they will no longer have to face that sort of competition from foreign companies and they won't have to prop up the quality of their product for them to get any sort of coverage on TV. We say that what this will lead to is a very unproductive and very low quality productions. And ultimately it drags down everything within our local economy, given the special role of the media in our society, and that it is basically the main source of advertising within our society. It provides entertainment for people, and we say that because of that important role, we think that it is inadvisable to protect these local industries when they are already dying. So let's move on to this argument about the role of government, ladies and gentlemen. We say that we completely agree with them that the role of government is to protect the interests and the rights of society. However, we only do this when we see that there's an inherent value in it. For example, the government seeks to try and protect all sorts of tangible and intangible cultural heritage within our society, because they think that this is something that's rooted in the collective memory of people, and that's why people think that we need to protect it, and therefore the government will actually protect it as well. However, we say that in this particular case, people don't perceive them as important. Now, how do we know that? We say that if people think it's important, they will probably watch it anyway. So, what have I told you today, ladies and gentlemen? I've told you that firstly, this model that the proposition has proposed is something that's actually not taking into account all the intricacies that they face today. That even if we accept their problem, we don't think that this is the correct solution, because we think that it's ultimately misguided in principle and impractical in reality. We tell you that there is nothing so special about local industries, and we think that the market forces of supply and demand are the best way of distributing resources. We tell you that it's time for dying industries to die, and we think, ladies and gentlemen, that that's why today's motion must fall.
Thank you very much. Welcome the second speaker for the afternoon.
Madam Speaker, what we want to achieve at the end of the day is to assure the freedom of pursuit of economic activity for every industry. We want to, as the responsible government, we want to provide equal chances for every industry to at least climb up the ladders to at least compete with these dominant industry who have been dominant before them, Madam Speaker. So we think as a responsible government, the government has the responsibility to first of all take care of the infant industries and especially because these infant industries are domestic industries, they have the responsibility to take care of their own citizens, and they have the responsibility to prioritize and give privileges to these citizens, Madam Speaker. So let me move on to my rebuttals. No, never mind. Before I move on to any of the rebuttals, Madam Speaker, let me clarify something. Our Prime Minister has come up here and told you how we're specifically talking about these movie and drama industries when we talk about the under today's motion, Madam Speaker. So we think all of their arguments about how people still watch domestic news is irrelevant under today's motion, Madam Speaker. We think especially because we're talking about movie and TV drama industries, we think these industries are just simple industries that have no relations with the domestic people. We think these industries are a reflection of the cultures of a certain nation and the reflection of the society, Madam Speaker. So we think we see a more dire need to implement this motion. So let me move on to my rebuttals. First of all, Madam Speaker, the leader of the opposition has come up here and told us how there may be this motion won't work because there are certain times that more people watch more TV dramas, for example, like during nighttime, Madam Speaker. We think the thing that they're talking about for that argument isn't mutually exclusive. Just because we set certain airtime, it doesn't mean that we're only going to set this certain airtime during non-popular airtime, Madam Speaker. So we think that's not mutually exclusive. And secondly, they have come up here and told us how in the status quo, we cannot avoid any industries from falling. We cannot secure every industry to survive, Madam Speaker. However, under their model, Madam Speaker, every industry is being sacrificed. No industries are getting this chance to at least climb up the ladder, Madam Speaker. Under our policy, however, we're at least assuring to provide this ladder to at least give them the chance and secure the seats for these infant industries to compete, Madam Speaker. So we think our government is being more responsible in terms of providing the true freedom of pursuit of economic activity, Madam Speaker. So we think when the government can implement measures to protect the weaker parties, then the government should do it. And let me moving on to my second rebuttal. They have come up here and told us how citizens are forced to watch these industries, Madam Speaker. Firstly, Madam Speaker, just because we're setting this quota system, we never said we're going to force every citizen to watch this TV shows, Madam Speaker. So they're misrepresenting our case totally. And we think we're only forcing to watch these channels under the mechanism. So we think our importance of our today's model is at least implementing this policy with a good intention of trying to provide this mechanism. So we think at the end of the day, even if not every citizen watch these TV dramas, we think there will be certain people, because of this mechanism, there will be more people, there will be the net benefit at the end of the day. So Madam Speaker, we think our policy is better. Moving on to my next rebuttal. They have come up here and told us how there will be no competitions, how this will not promote developments of these industries. We think this is not the case. Under the quota system, there will be competition between these domestic industries, Madam Speaker. We think in order to get seats within this quota system, there will be still competitions between these movie and drama industries. So we think that is not the case what the opposition was talking about. So let me move on to my arguments, Madam Speaker. I'll be talking about the long-term benefits that this motion may bring. In terms of 4 levels of analysis, Madam Speaker, I'm going to firstly talk about how it specifically brings long-term benefits to domestic industry, and secondly, how this promotes economic growth of that certain nation. And thirdly, I'm going to also talk about how this creates more appreciation and value of certain culture, of that domestic culture. And lastly, I'm also going to talk about how this benefits the international society as a whole. So let me move on to my first level of analysis. Madam Speaker, we think the screen quota system gives an incentive to create better quality movies for these domestic movie and drama industry, Madam Speaker, because they now know that at least there are certain seats secured for them. There are seats left for them. So we think this may be an incentive for these domestic drama and movie industries to try to create better quality movies and media content, Madam Speaker. So we think there will be higher chance for these domestic industries to prosper at the end of the day. Under government's insurance of economic freedom, these comparatively weaker and infant industries at least will get the chance. So we think there will be it is more highly likely for these infant domestic industries to at least get the chance to prosper, which is a benefit for these domestic people who try to create these movie and drama industries. Second level of analysis, we think more domestic consumption leads to economic development of the entire country, Madam Speaker. Because, when there are demand and supply, there is, faster flow of economy, right? So if there are more people demand more of domestic content, these media industries, we think this also promotes the economy of the certain nation, Madam Speaker. At the end of the day, because there will be certain developments coming out of this motion. So we think by promoting certain industries, media industries, we're also at the same time achieving economic development. Moving on to my third level of analysis, we think this motion creates more appreciation and value of domestic content, and it also creates an environment for people to appreciate their own culture more. Because, Madam Speaker, as we have told you, we think this movie is not a simple, only profit-seeking industry. We think these movies and drama is a reflection of the society and is a reflection of the culture, Madam Speaker. So at the end of the day, by providing more chances for these domestic people to at least experience and at least have this minimum chance to see these channels, we think we're creating more chances for these domestic people to appreciate their culture by experiencing and exploring about these movie industries. So lastly, Madam Speaker, how does this also benefit the international society? We think promotion of diverse fields of movie and drama industries, promotes benefits in terms of the international level. The example that they have told us how in Hong Kong people watch Korea, talk show. The existence of Bollywood and Hallyu, which is like the promotion of Korean culture, we think these things are now possible under our policy because we're assuring that certain domestic cultures should be seats for certain domestic cultures should be secured. We believe that this will lead to the development of that certain culture, and at the end of the day, because of the development, the exports and the more chances for other people from other countries to experience these movie industries the chances will be higher. So at the end of the day, people will have more diverse chances to experience diverse fields of movie and drama industries. So we think because of these benefits and because of the government's role to protect the infant and relatively weaker industries, we think this motion should stand. Thank
you very much. We would now like to invite the second speaker to take it.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to say a special hello to the people who are not in Korea who are watching the live streaming of this debate right now, because you don't know how lucky you are, because if this evil quota is put in place, you may never get to watch this kind of quality TV anymore. Now today, ladies and gentlemen, we see an affirmative side that is like an overprotective mother who never wants to see her children venture out into society and to take chances, and they want to provide everything so that their infants can grow and prosper. And today the opposite side will prove to you how their policy will eventually lead to the suffocation and death of these children. Now today, before moving on to my two substantives, which I will talk about how their policy is an unjustified government intervention on the corporate rights of companies and an unjustified restriction of the freedom of speech of these media corporations, I will move on to my rebuttals. First of all, on how they have come out and told us about how news programs are not a part of this debate. Well, I don't want to get into a definitional argument, but I just want to say that even if the examples don't stand, Ben's arguments still stand, and I will be, further elaborating on that later on. And second of all, I would like to do a very kindergarten level analysis and tell you why citizens actually watch TV. Ladies and gentlemen, citizens watch TV because there is something good on TV. They don't watch it just because they want to turn on TV just for turning it on. And so we say that ultimately it is the quality of the TV programs that matter. And ultimately this is something that they have failed to recognize in today's model. Now I will proceed to rip apart the second speaker's four points, and I will go about it with her headings. First of all, she told us about how their model will create better incentive to create better quality TV. Now this is directly clashing with what Benjamin has come out and told you. We say that incentive to improve comes from competition that exists in businesses and in markets. And today, when you reserve this sort of time slot for these companies, then they will feel complacent, and they will feel like even if I don't work hard and I provide crappy TV shows, people will these companies will still buy my channel and buy my programs, and they will still put it on TV. And so you know what? There will be no incentive to improve because you're basically guaranteeing them primetime spot on national TV, and that is why we say that you are actually taking away the incentive to create better quality TV. Second of all, they talk about how this will lead to economic growth, of this whole country, because somehow people will be willing to watch bad TV shows. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there are two kinds of local domestically produced TVs. There's the good kind and there's the bad kind. For the good kind, it will already be bought by these companies because they're good, and they will already be on TV. And there are the bad kinds that no one buys because simply they're crappy. So today I'm assuming that in today's debate you are talking about the bad, low quality TV that nobody actually wants to watch, and you want to protect them just for protection's sake. Now, third of all, you talked about how this will lead to better appreciation of culture, by people. Now, first of all, I seriously doubt why people need to experience their own culture on TV, because it's their own culture. And so secondly, we say that if these TV shows are of such good quality, then they will already be bought by media companies, and there will be no need to worry about them. Fourth of all, they talked about how this will lead to a promotion of local culture to international societies. And we say that this ultimately is dependent on good quality TV shows. And we say that ultimately you are creating this set of satisfied state that these local medias will stay in. And we say that that is ultimately completely unhealthy for anything that you're trying to push for. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me move on to my 2 points of substantive today. First of all, we say, that this is an unjustified governmental intervention and restriction on corporate rights. We say that these private companies who choose what to buy, to show on their TV, we say that ultimately they are allowed to play by the rules of supply and demand. They are not, a political tool of the government. They do not have to follow any political agendas of the government. And ultimately, we have to recognize the need of these private companies to earn money, ladies and gentlemen. And today, we say that in status quo, the government only intervenes in situations where these media corporations are actively harming our citizens. For example, we will limit, for example, haunted movies or pornography to 3 a.m. slots where probably all the children are already in bed. And we say that this sort of government intervention only exists because we recognize that such movies may have an adverse impact on children. And that's why it is an example of government restriction on the corporate's rights on what to show, because there is active harm on society. And we say that today, you're proposing an unnecessary and very disproportionate way to supposedly protect your so-called domestic media companies. And we say that there's simply no need for such protectionism policies, because there's simply no harm that you have identified. And we say that when you restrict media corporations to buy locally produced products, for a large proportion of their time, you're basically locking them in a stagnant position and you force them to not buy programs or channels that might potentially be more profitable. And we said that this ultimately leads to the overall death of the industry, ladies and gentlemen. Today they came out and told us that they want the economy to prosper, and we tell you that this will lead to the exact opposite effect, because when you restrict such practices, you are actually negatively impacting the vitality of the business. And we say that in order for a free market to prosper, we need to allow the companies to run by the rules of supply and demand. And we say that we recognize that in today's world, the TV is already threatened by things like YouTube, BT, where you can download movies for free. When you stop these companies from buying channels that are attractive to these citizens, then they will simply turn to the many alternatives that are available to them on the internet, on other forms of media. And we say that there is simply no threat posed by this kind of policy. And we say that ultimately, if you really want the media industry in your country to prosper, we say allow the rules of demand and supply to go freely. Now, secondly, onto my second substantive, I would like to talk about how this policy is an unjustified restriction on these media corporations' freedom of speech. Now, we say that the freedom of speech not only encompasses what you want to say, it also encompasses the platform for which you want to say, the time when you want to say it. And we say that, and they came out and told us that they're, reserving these prime time slots for, locally produced products. And we say that ultimately, you have to recognize that prime time is where most citizens would turn on the TV and watch it. And ultimately, these programs shown on TV will have a higher impact on citizens, and you're restricting the platform in which these media corporations can say what they want to say and convey what they want to citizens of their society. And we say that each company has the right to choose what they want to convey to society. They have the right to choose what they want to buy and to portray to society, and we should not limit their opportunities to do such things. And ultimately, we have seen the media's very important role in shaping a society's thoughts. We have seen the media's very important role in spreading messages and in influencing how a nation thinks. And we say that ultimately, this freedom of speech is based on the freedom of thought, which we recognize as very valuable and very conducive to a deliberative democracy. And we say that ultimately we value diversity of opinion in society. We do not only want locally produced movies, because we also think that our local citizens would benefit from from being exposed to international programs, and ultimately this will lead to a more diversified, pluralistic society whose people can actually argue with each other and are not homogeneous. And ultimately, this is what leads to a society's overall improvement. And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you really want the local economy to prosper, if you really want local people to improve, then please go for the opposite side. Thank you very much.